The following is a conversation with Dr. Stephen Geanopulos, also known as Dr. G. Dr. G is a speaker, writer, and leader in the world of functional medicine, functional neurology, and he is quickly becoming one of America's leading experts in lifelong optimized living. Dr. G has helped heal thousands of people for over 2 decades worldwide, leveraging chiropractic care, functional neurology, and functional nutrition. He works with patients suffering from gut, brain, and hormone-related conditions. Through his personally crafted rejuvenation system, he has proven that diminished health and vitality can be improved by just about any proactive person at any age with nearly any illness. Speaking all around the world, he is renowned for his upbeat and lively personality, as he gives insightful and innovative lectures to a wide range of audiences, including both industry professionals, general public, and patients. Dr. G has completed his postgraduate studies in the field of functional neurology and has attained board certification through the Carrick Institute, a distinction shared by fewer than 700 doctors worldwide. A lifelong learner and self-care advocate, he has completed hundreds of hours of training in the field of functional medicine, and he currently applies his methods with patients all around the globe. Dr. G is a return guest on the Co-Movement Gym podcast. Today, we're going to dive into the benefits of cold and heat immersion. It's a popular topic now, one that I want more clarity on. I personally take a 60-second cold shower each day and use our infrared sauna for 45 minutes once a week. I feel great afterwards, but I want to understand why. My hopes are that this talk provides insight into the benefits of these two treatments and inspires people to implement them into their daily lives. You are listening to the Co-Movement Gym podcast, where we inspire people to move and live courageously. If you are enjoying this content, please support our sponsors in the description. I thank each and every one of you for being on this journey with us. Now, please enjoy the show. Folks, listen up. I want to take a brief moment and thank our podcast show sponsors, Lombardi Chiropractic, Native Path Supplements, and Redmond Life. Lombardi Chiropractic has been my personal chiropractor for 10 years and has kept my body strong and healthy. Native Path Supplements are used by numerous co-movement clients and our coaching team here at the facility. I highly recommend that you try their chocolate collagen peptides. I was made aware of Redmond Life by one of our trainers here at the facility. He recommended I try Relight electrolyte powder. This supplement has dramatically improved my afternoon energy levels and overall hydration. I'd like to thank these 3 companies for providing outstanding service and products that make our society healthier and more resilient. Mention the Co-Movement Gym podcast when you call Lombardi Chiropractic, and not only will they treat you like family, they will provide a nice, enticing discount to all listeners. And use code COMO15, that's C-O-M-O 15, at checkout when shopping at nativepath.com or redmond.life and receive 15% off all your orders. Your support to our show sponsors assists in us paying for expenses and continuing to provide content we hope you all enjoy. All right, Dr. G, welcome back to the Co-Movement Gym podcast. How you doing?
I'm doing great. It's great to be here, Josh.
Yeah, our last chat had a lot of people following it, liking it, interacting with it. You're always a wealth of information, so I was thrilled to have you back on. I want to dive in to a topic that is trending as quite popular now. I'm on board with it also and seeing some amazing results. But I was talking with our trainer Andy here, who you know, and we were talking about, yes, people are really into the cold showers and, the sauna work, and which is the topic of this conversation, the cold and hot immersions. But what is the science or the physicality benefits? Like, why are we even doing this, right? Because I feel like 9 out of 10 people, a lot of times will just follow the crowd because that's what, the majority are doing. I'm very interested, and so is Andy. why are we even doing this? So I want to start this conversation off with first, what are some examples of cold immersion and hot immersion for the listeners?
So when it comes to just exposing yourself to different temperatures, the idea there is kind of along the lines of what we discussed the last time, which is giving your body a reason to adapt to stress. We live in a very comfortable world, the world that we've created for ourselves. It's 72 degrees no matter where you live all the time because we have heat and air conditioning. We have readily available food. There's never any stressor that our body has to adapt to. And there's a great benefit to stress. People say stress is a killer. Well, the inability to adapt to stress is the killer. And what we want to do is give ourselves that kind of stress. Now, we're not talking about the kind of stress where, you get an email from somebody and it's or a bill you weren't expecting or something along those lines. But rather, we're talking about physical stressor that would otherwise put you in danger, right? So if you immerse yourself into 35 degrees of water, well, that's kind of dangerous, right? So the body's going to go to extremes to protect you, and it would surprise you what you can actually handle. So that's the reason why we do it, to create a stressor that allows for the body to adapt to that stressor. So then the question becomes, what does the science say is actually happening? And is it a good idea to habitually put yourself in that situation?
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of the science and the research is done, for things like Alzheimer's and heart disease and diabetes. And there's really just amazing information coming from just hot and cold exposure for those kinds of metabolic disorders. And then the question becomes, well, what about performance, right? So on the performance side, we got a lot more history. We can go back into the literature, from the Soviet Union, some of the most interesting, what was great, if I could just go on a tangent for a second here, some of the most interesting things that happened in the Cold War was that during the Cold War, there was no sharing of scientific information. The sports scientists, and we know that the Soviets, for those of you who are I guess younger than 50 years old, the Soviet Union was the Cold War was a battle, intellectual battle between the East and the West, and the East was represented by the Soviet Union, where they invested heavily in sport research, science research, and so did we. But we didn't share that information. So they went in crazy directions. So there have been some people who've gone and looked back at the Soviet data from that era, and they were doing amazing things with cold exposure, electrical stimulation, saunas, etc. And that information, goes back a long way. We can go back centuries and look at how athletes have been using cold exposure for their health. But when it comes to disease, that's more recent, that's newer. So on the performance side, there's a lot of old information that we can look back on and tradition and see the benefit. On the disease side, it's new, it's shocking, and I say shocking, not to be hyperbolic, but I say shocking because it really is. The ability, in my videos, and you've been following me on Instagram, I try to simplify concepts that are complicated for people to understand, because I believe that they should be understandable and that people can take action if they understand something. And what I find is that if we can make these concepts more understandable to people, they'll be less scary, and people will actually do them, right? So when it comes to cold exposure, there's different ways of doing it. There's you can wear a cold vest. You can take a cold shower. You can jump into ice water. You can go into there are people who are buying these cold immersion tanks that are 49 degrees or 52 degrees, which doesn't sound very cold, but it's freezing.
Yeah, it is. Yep.
And the research is kind of all over the place in the sense that there is research that shows benefit from wearing a 62-degree cold vest for 3 hours that is very similar to swimming in 35-degree water for 20 seconds. So, and there's just a wide range of different kinds of exposures that you could have that are more or less tolerable for different people. So I kind of went all over the place just to frame the conversation. So just ask that question again, because I want to make sure I don't go too far off on a tangent.
No, you gave a great example, Steve, or Dr. G there with, the cold, and then obviously hot being sauna, right? Is that primarily what we're looking at here?
Yes.
Awesome. Yeah, that's a stage I wanted to set for people. You did it brilliantly there. There's many benefits to this stress and this adaptation. And, I want people familiar and understanding that there's many different examples, and you gave them with cold immersion. Hot immersion's a little different, right? It's more or less just the sauna work. But moving on, I want to get into the actual benefits of shocking your body with cold water, okay, or cold exposure. What are the benefits of that? Because you mentioned in our first podcast about, is it cold shock proteins? Is that something?
Heat shock protein.
Okay, heat shock proteins. Okay, so let's get into that, because when I'm standing in a freezing cold shower at 6:30 a.m. For my 60 seconds a day, or occasionally when I jump in a river or a lake, up in the Adirondacks and it's freezing, I want to know, what are the health benefits of this? I feel amazing afterwards. And so a quick disclaimer, I've been going now 4 months in a row, 60 seconds cold shower, primarily in the morning. And while I don't have the actual health benefits of this, that's your job, going to be explained that to the listeners. I can say I feel amazing afterwards. It's getting significantly easier now to get into the water. And I almost crave it, to where if I forgot or I'm in a real hurry, my body almost says you want that. Okay. Then probably in addition to the biggest benefit is it's almost like ingesting 900 milligrams of caffeine, especially if you do it in the morning. Like, my energy goes through the roof, okay, after a 60-second cold shower. Now, the 60-second cold shower, I'm getting into the water cold. There's a huge difference here for me personally. Sometimes the day doesn't work out that way, and I'll do the warm shower, normal, and then I'll end with the 60-second cold. But starting with that 60-second cold does something to my energy levels that is spectacular. And so I just wanted to put that out there for people that are considering this. That's what I have experienced in the first 4 months of doing this. And so let's get into the actual health benefits of cold, Dr. G.
All right, that was great. So what I'll say is, when it comes to putting yourself in that environment, we said before, it's a stressor, so it's going to release stress hormones. And one of the stress hormones it releases that we studied quite a bit, I say we, that they've studied quite a bit, is norepinephrine. Norepinephrine also has a name, noradrenaline. So that's a term that everyone can understand. Under stress, if a lion is chasing you and you need to run away, you need adrenaline, noradrenaline, in order to constrict your blood vessels, deliver oxygen, deliver glucose, so you can run and survive. So that comes from, noradrenaline or norepinephrine is both a neurotransmitter and a hormone. So as a hormone, it comes from the adrenal glands, right? Those are the glands that most people can identify as being our stress glands. And then, of course, in our brain, it's a neurotransmitter. There's an area of the brain they call the locus coeruleus. So that's important because there's benefits. You're going to release norepinephrine as a neurotransmitter and as a hormone. Okay, so let's start as a hormone. as a hormone, it's going to activate a protein in your muscles and in your fat that is going to create what's called mitogenesis. So mitogenesis just means I'm going to make more engines of energy in my muscle cells and my fat cells. The fat cell part is very important. So the energy engines we have called mitochondria. So let's just kind of frame that for the audience here. Your muscle cell is, all the cells in your body have energy needs. It's kind of like your cells are a motor vehicle. And that motor vehicle, if we take the analogy with a car, you have, gas and air mix into the engine of the vehicle to combust and create energy called horsepower so the car can move. Well, in your cells, it's kind of the same thing. Let's just think about our muscle cells. You take oxygen and glucose, air and gasoline, put them into the engine of the cell called the mitochondria. It combusts, literally combusts, to create energy. And we call that energy ATP. And that allows us to move our body, that allows us to make proteins, that allows us to do a lot of things. Now, if you have more engines, you're going to create more energy. And that's important because with cold exposure, you need to do what? You need to create heat. So what happens is you need more of these mitochondria. Now, what's beautiful is that the mitochondria is something that we lose as we get older. It decreases as you get past the first third of your life. So let's just say our life should be 100 years. The first third is in your early 30s, and then you start to lose mitochondria. You lose your energy production. One of the best ways that we can maintain and grow more mitochondria after that first third is through exercise, of course, but now we're finding out through cold exposure. But here's what's fascinating. The exercise part is going to create mitogenesis or more mitochondria in our muscle cells, and we get that. But cold exposure will do that also in our fat. Now, it's fascinating because a lot of the videos that I do are about insulin resistance and how, as we get older, we lose our ability to store carbohydrates that we eat. So as we get older, we become more carbohydrate intolerant because we have less, as our muscles get smaller and weaker, we have less storage capacity for the carbohydrates we eat. And so we turn it into fat. So we get weaker and fatter, even if we're the same weight 20 years later. Well, we always think of fat as just being this place to store energy and that nothing happens with it, but it's a very vibrant, alive organ in your body. Think of all the body fat you have as a single organ that communicates with the rest of your body. And when we're babies, we have a lot of what's called brown fat. And brown fat is fat that is energy active because a baby has to prevent the loss of heat. So what they do is they put mitochondria, engines of energy production, in their fat cells, and that's what makes it brown. Literally, it's brown. So if you were to take the body fat of an adult American who's basically, domesticated, so to speak, and not very active, that fat is going to be very pale, almost yellow whitish. But if we were to take the fat from somebody who's living in the Arctic, who needs their fat to be much more active, they have a lot more mitochondria, it's going to have a more brown color. Okay, you're a hunter, right?
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
So what's the biggest difference in the meat of a wild turkey compared to a domestic turkey?
It's significantly darker.
Significantly darker because of the mitochondria. Whether whether the mitochondria be in the meat, in the muscle, or the fat, it's significantly darker. And that's the difference. It's mitochondria that makes it darker. Matter of fact, white meat and dark meat poultry, right? So the breast of the animal is not a postural muscle, it's a power muscle, so it's white meat. Whereas the legs are postural. You have to use them all the time. It's dark meat. That's mitochondria meat, right? And there's a a lot more fat in that meat, and that is active brown fat. Okay, so we kind of put that out there. Now, are most Americans like domesticated turkeys or wild turkeys?
Yeah, definitely the domesticated.
Correct. So what we found is that with cold exposure, here's where I'm going to circle back here. I'm sorry to go on such a
No, this is great. This is great.
But what they found is that the mitochondria are increased in the fat of people exposed to people who experience cold exposure, and that becomes a new place to put glucose. You see, we always thought if you don't have muscle, the only thing you can do is turn your glucose into fat and then store it, and we get fatter. And that's true for the white meat domesticated Americans. But for the wild, those of us who pretend to be wild Americans, we have another place to put that glucose and use it. And here's the way it works. You enter into the cold immersion, and your body has to survive. It's got to create energy. So what it does, so I said before, the engine of the cell is the mitochondria, and it produces energy called ATP. So just like your car, some of that energy goes to the transmission to move the car. Some of that energy goes to heat. Right? Some of that energy goes to heat. Yep. Same thing with a light bulb, right? Some of that energy creates light, some of that energy creates heat. So what happens with cold exposure is it uncouples the mitochondria in your muscle. And of course, this happens readily in your fat because your fat doesn't move you. It uncouples it from the mechanical energy. So I drive a standard shift vehicle. So I know that if my car is in gear and I depress the clutch, I hit the gas, the engine is just going to create heat. There'll be no motion. So I've uncoupled the engine from the motion of the car. So I create heat. Well, cold exposure does the same thing to the mitochondria of your muscles, where you'll burn ATP without moving your body. That's actually, and there's shivering and non-shivering. Shivering is not uncoupled, and shivering is not very efficient. It does create some heat, but it's not a great way to do it because you're wasting a lot of that energy on actually shivering, which is motion. But when you uncouple it, now you're just creating heat. You're just, you're taking that sugar and you're creating ATP, and it's just burning off as heat, and that heats you from the inside, and you survive the cold environment. Now, that happens in fat. The more cold exposure you have, the more your body wants to be ready for that cold exposure, the more mitochondria it builds in your fat, and then your fat becomes a heat-producing, energy-burning organ that you never had before.
Wow.
Isn't that
Wow.
cool?
Wow.
So that's the mechanism there. So that's stimulated by norepinephrine, stimulating a protein. I can't remember the name of the protein, and that creates mitogenesis. I think it's CP1 something or another. But the idea here is more mitochondria, more energy production, more sugar burning, more heat. And if you're at risk for type 2 diabetes or prediabetes or insulin resistance, you're going to become much more insulin sensitive. You're going to remove excess glucose, and you're going to burn that energy as if you were exercising.
Huh. Wow. So that cold plunge is a form of physical exercise in and of itself, right? Almost.
Right. From an energy burning standpoint.
Huh. Wow.
By the way, the numbers are massive. Again, I'm not the best at recalling individual studies, but these studies are out there, and there was one study where they put diabetics into t-shirts outside in the wintertime for 2 hours, So that's the cold exposure. It's not like they jumped into 35-degree water. They're wearing a t-shirt in the wintertime outside for 2 hours. So let's just say it's, I don't know, 35 degrees. They're wearing a t-shirt. They got to move around. They got to, keep themselves active. It's 2 hours. They did that for 10 days.
Okay.
After 10 days, they improved their insulin sensitivity by 40%.
Oh, wow.
I don't know of drugs that can do that.
Sure.
Right? So this is powerful stuff. We're not talking about, extreme temperatures here. There are cold vests that are in the upper 50s, 7-degree cold vests, and you put that on for several hours, and you could be in your office doing work with a cold vest. Matter of fact, a lot of there's benefit wearing cold vests for people with certain neurodegenerative disorders like multiple sclerosis and things of that nature that have benefited from that kind of cold exposure as well. So there's different ways of doing it, but the main point I think to drive home here is improved metabolic health, hormone sensitivity, fat burning, something I think all Americans can benefit from. Now, that's on the hormone side. What about the neurotransmitter side? So on the neurotransmitter side, if we look at depression, attention deficit disorder, even anxiety, a lot of the medications have a component to them called norepinephrine reuptake inhibition. So, for example, in ADHD, there are some very popular medications that are both a dopamine reuptake inhibitor and a norepinephrine reuptake inhibitor. So what does that mean? It means more norepinephrine. If there's more norepinephrine, then there's a psychiatric benefit to that. Well, we just said before, going into the cold is going to increase your norepinephrine, and that provide psychiatric benefits. So people with depression, attention deficit, anxiety can benefit from cold exposure as well.
Wow. Yeah. So that's so you could almost say that you get leaner with cold showers. That's fascinating. You summarize that really nice. Why do you think that? I'm just curious, like, why do you think that our bodies have adapted over thousands of years to actually benefit from cold and hot exposure? Is that because our ancestors, like cavemen, were exposed for longer durations of cold and hot, and over those years, it actually became beneficial to us to be exposed to that, right? Because it obviously can kill you also, right? Like cold too long kills you, or hot too long can kill you. And so there's a fine balance here, but like our bodies took away a positive effect from both of these. Do you think that was just purely out of a means of survival back when we were cavemen?
Oh, for sure. And you don't have to go back that far. If we just look at the diaries of those who came across the ocean first in the 1600s, in particular in Cape Cod, there's some journals and diaries where the natives on Cape Cod, in the Cape Cod area of Massachusetts, it was dead of winter, and they're just wearing they're not wearing they're not wearing a top. They just kind of have their loincloth, or and that's it, and some protection on their feet. But there could have been very cold temperatures, and the natives were running around quite comfortable. So the human body can adapt. Now, would I take the standard American person in 2023 and stick them expecting? Absolutely not. But if you were born exposed to the elements your whole life, there's an adaptive response. And think about, as we came out, we humans survived and came out of the Ice Age, right? I mean, North America was populated by people walking across a frozen Bering Strait from Russia across through to Alaska down into North America. That was and is some of the coldest parts of the world. so their ability to survive is certainly remarkable, and that's who we are genetically. We're not that far. We're talking about a few thousand years. Even if it's 15,000 years, is not enough to change who we are from an evolutionary standpoint. The only difference is we've been domesticated.
Yeah. Well, I just said yesterday to my wife how this winter so far here in the Northeast, I have been the least cold so far. And it didn't really hit me till I pieced that together yesterday that I'm exposing myself 1 minute a day to the coldest my shower will go. I don't know the temperature, but it is cold. It shocks me. And I'm much less cold this time of year. I'm running around, with lighter clothes on, and I'm not fearing going out and scraping my car, getting blasted in the face with wind. When I walk to the gym, I'm definitely more resilient, due to that exposure. I know you had mentioned that, you said our mitochondria, it decreases after the first third of our life. Is that what you said? So this is just a random question, and I don't know if it's a correlate, but is that why older people get colder easier or no?
Well, I would say I try to avoid a linear, here's the reason why, right? So there's going to be a few factors. And yes, there's going to be less activation of muscle. There's going to be less muscle density. Think about what muscle is. It's a covering, right? It's an armor for you that protects you from falls, but also protects you from temperature. And the amount of fat you have as it increases as you get older, and your muscle decreases as you get older, it's also going to alter your energy producing hormones, and energy producing hormone would be, example would be thyroid hormone. So we know there are fluctuations in thyroid hormone that occur with age that could also contribute to that. So yes, but that mitochondria story, we told it from a fat and muscle perspective. Well, if the most metabolically active cells in your body have the greatest number of mitochondria. So let's just say a fat cell has, 10 mitochondria, just for round number purposes. A muscle cell will have 1,000. A brain cell will have 10,000. So when mitochondria in the body decreases, it decreases across all systems. So your question about mitochondria, less so when my mind doesn't necessarily go to why the elderly are more temperature sensitive. My mind goes to what's happening in the brain. So as we get early cognitive decline, which becomes, Alzheimer's in some people, a portion of that is poor mitochondrial health, not just in their body, but in their brain.
Oh, wow. That's a strong connection. And you said, Dr. G, that research now is showing that connection.
Oh yeah. Yeah. So again, we've been talking about cold immersion this whole time, but we can also talk about heat, right? And some of the most profound sauna studies looking at cognitive decline or neurodegeneration, Alzheimer's, they're looking at cardiovascular disease and all-cause mortality dramatically improving with the regular use of sauna. And the numbers are, we used to say, at least I used to say, maybe some of that is healthy user bias, right? So they do the research and they say, oh, look, the people who do saunas, 4 times a week are clearly healthier. Well, those are also the people who are less likely to smoke, less likely to drink too much, more likely to do other things that improve their health. But they've teased out the research in Scandinavia, most significantly, to where that is not in question anymore. There's dose-dependent predictability for those diseases and the benefits you get. Now, I think the cold immersion research is catching up. I think there's the research on sauna and heat is older and more abundant. One thing we didn't talk about with the cold immersion, by the way, is the effect on the immune system.
Okay. Yes. Well, that's funny because we're going to get to the heat next. That leads me into this question is the immune system. Now, it's funny. This is a specific question right here. People say all the time, I hear this all the time, that don't go outside and get cold because you're going to get a cold, right? Or put your jacket on, Johnny, and hat and gloves because we don't want you to have a stuffy nose. So and I laugh, obviously, knowing that that's not the case, but can you explain to people the immunity side of being exposed, the benefits of being exposed to the cold?
Yeah. So first of all, the catching a cold thing is just because, over time, we correlated, flu season coincides with,
Sure.
temperature changes in the Northern Hemisphere in particular, but also when it's cold outside, we are indoors and we, have less ventilation, and we share our viruses with each other more readily than in the warmer temperatures. And as a matter of fact, some of the COVID research was pretty clear that August was a bad time for spreading COVID in Florida because everybody's indoors.
Yep.
So they're not outside because it's just oppressively humid and hot, and people just, that's not where they work and they live. They want to be indoors, and they're 72 degrees. So you would have a rapid spread of viruses in August in Florida. And then all of a sudden, here comes November, December in the Northeast, and people are spreading their viruses, right? So it has less to do with temperature and more to do with how we spread viruses. All right, let's just get that out of the way. Now, cold exposure has a very dramatic impact on the immune system in a very positive way. And I'll just direct people to the documentaries or information you can get online on with regards to Wim Hof. Yeah. Wim Hof is kind of like the person who made cold cool.
Yep.
And he was able, he and his students were able to have bacterial, so lipopolysaccharides is a lipopolysaccharide is kind of a part of a bacterial cell that causes our immune system to get active and makes us feel sick, right? It's our protection. So if we inject lipopolysaccharide, if you inject me right now with lipopolysaccharide, I'm going to get a fever, chills. I'm going to have all the symptoms of a terrible viral infection. So Wim Hof told researchers, hey, I can control my immune system at will. They're like, you're crazy. So they immersed him into ice. They packed him in ice up to his neck with his arm sticking out, and they injected him with lipopolysaccharide. He didn't get any of those symptoms. Wow. He used his breath and his temperature regulation in order to control his immune system. And they were able, minute by minute, they were able to measure his immune activity to protect him against the lipopolysaccharide insult. And then they said, the researchers were like, all right, you've defied the textbooks, you are a freak. And therefore we'll write it off to Wim Hof being just one of those people that can do weird stuff, right? Like circus act. And he goes, no, I can train anybody. He goes, why don't you give me your team, your team of researchers here, and I'll train them for 2 weeks, and they can do the same thing. And that's what happened, to the point where textbooks have to be rewritten based on what they found. So, and again, it's the body's response to stress. It wants to survive. We can take an extreme example of that and say, you get your arm chopped off in a farming accident, and you're 30 miles from the nearest surgeon, why don't you bleed to death? Because your body responds, the severed arteries go into spasm, protect the bleeding from being excessive, protects your brain, your heart, and your vital organs, so you have the time to get somewhere to survive. So that's how the body will do extreme things for survivability. And there's no, since your immune system is one of your main protectants, right? It's what protects you the most. Of course, under stress, heat, cold, etc., your immune system is to adapt. So I've many times in my life, I thought the best thing for me to do when I have a flu or a cold is to work out. Because I'm gonna sweat it out, kind of a
Definitely,
thing.
sure.
And I've had terrible, uncontrollable bronchitis, but I go to the gym. I activate those systems. The stress hormones I'm creating causes a relaxation and dilation of my airways, and I don't have bronchitis while I'm working out. As soon as I shower up, finish my workout, and then I go back to coughing like a crazy person, my bronchitis. But that is an example of how the body adapts.
Yeah, that's amazing. So for listeners out there, don't avoid the cold, embrace the cold, let your kid go outside and get cold, obviously, in a controlled manner, but don't be living in this 72-degree, sterile environment 24/7. So Dr. G, what cold protocol can you recommend for people that are interested? Because I'm sure people are going to want to give this a shot. So I mentioned I'm doing 60 seconds cold shower once a day. What do you recommend?
I recommend getting started. So the most comfortable way of doing it is, it can be as simple as going for a brief walk outside in the wintertime with a t-shirt on, as long as you can tolerate. So taking your dog for a walk, let's say you go 100 yards out and 100 yards back, that's, twice across a football field, that's pretty good. When you take your morning shower and it's cold outside, you finish your shower the way you mentioned before, by turning that knob, let it get cold, and see what you can tolerate. Initially, it's going to be 5 to 10 seconds. Right?
It was for me. I was shocked at that. That was exactly what it was for me.
And what you'll find also is that when the cold wave hits you, what you want to do is not have it just hit your head and face. You kind of want to back up and let the shower hit your chest, your abdomen, your under your arms, where you're a lot more sensitive, right? Let that happen. And what's going to happen also is you're going to have a breath response. Like you're just going to, your airway is going to just open. Let that happen. It's okay. If you do it daily, it's kind of like meditation. You just get better at it. And by the way, getting better at it, we're talking about like 4 or 5 days. It's not this long drawn out training program. What you'll try to do is, you can sit there and count 1,000, 2, 1,000, like count your seconds. Try to get to 30 seconds, 10, 15, 20, build up to 30 seconds. But then instead of trying to continue from 30 to 45 to 60, get your breath under control. Get your breath under control to the point where you do not have that massive response to inhale. Now, Wim Hof, there's a whole method in his, and I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I know, you could get Wim Hof's information anywhere now, and he has a whole breathing protocol. I think the main idea is increase your exposure to the temperature change and control your breath, and do that with the shower. There's also cryotherapy chambers. I think most of the research comes from cold immersion with water, but cryotherapy also has good research. It's kind of like the difference between traditional sauna and infrared sauna. The traditional sauna has a lot more research. Water immersion has a lot more research, but there is research on cryotherapy, those chambers that you would pay money to go in, and it's like negative 165 degrees or something like that. I think the research is better with the water immersion, but there's good research with that too. I just don't see a reason to go to a place and pay money to stand in a chamber when you can just go in your shower or your bathtub. Now, start with the shower, start with outdoor exposure, and then it would be just great to do it in a bath. And cold plunges have become quite popular, and you can get one that's kind of like a hot tub. Matter of fact, they have ones that are really cool. They're cold plunges that can also be converted to a hot tub and then back to a cold plunge. And those can run anywhere, I think, from $3,000 to $7,000. But nice to have it at the house. Most people put them outside, or you can get a big tin tub, put it in your backyard, and jump in.
That's how I would roll up here in rural central New York. I'd buy a cattle trough and I would knock the ice off of it every morning and just jump in that sucker and then go on with my day. I haven't gotten to that point yet, but it is something that's crossing my mind, because I think I could manage the ice if every day I broke that top layer off and never let it get too thick, right? Yeah, that's where I'm headed with this, Dr. G. Yeah.
So the colder the temperature, the less time you need in there, right?
Yep.
So the benefits in the research, they've had benefits of people swimming for 20 seconds in 35-degree water, and benefits of people doing, cold exposure for 2 hours in a t-shirt outside. The less extreme, the more time you need. The more extreme, the less time you need. So that's how I would, just find the method that works best for you, but just know, like exercise, there's a progression. There's a progression. You want to progress to newer and newer ways.
And one thing I want to go ahead, Dr. G.
I'm sorry. What I was going to say is down here in the New York City area, there's a lot of ethnic cultures, and there's Turkish bathhouses and Russian bathhouses. They call them the banya, and you go there and they have these incredibly hot Russian saunas. You have to wear a special cap. They beat you up with branches while you're in there. It's a quite an experience. They set the temperature for 205 degrees, but with people going in and out, it's at like 195 degrees. I mean, we're talking about just, not that far from boiling water, right?
Sure.
So you're sitting in there. The longest I've ever been able to tolerate that sauna is 10 minutes. The point where they have a regular sauna, which is 175 degrees or 180 degrees, right next to it. It quite frankly feels like you just stepped into air conditioning.
That's interesting, because my sauna here at the gym, I have an infrared, is 135, and I have to sit in that for 45 minutes. At the last 20, I'm sweating very, very heavy. But you're talking at those degrees, how long are you in something that hot?
So 195 degrees, I've never been able to tolerate more than 10 minutes.
Wow.
So on 180 or 175 degree sauna, I can stay, I do stay in there for 20 minutes.
Okay.
And it's not like it bothers me. It's a good feeling. But going from the 195 degrees into the 175 degrees, like I said, it feels air conditioning. And then we jump into the cold plunge. So they have it all there. They have a steam, a regular sauna, a super sauna, and a cold plunge. And we just kind of do a cycle. And then that cycle can take like 20 minutes. And then you go back to the table and you BS with your friends, and you can eat food and have conversation. We spend the whole day there. It's quite an experience. Now, some of the Russian community, they like to drink alcohol, and they'll drink a lot of vodka during that, because they're going into the sauna and sweating it out, I guess. I'm not sure. I don't recommend that in any way, shape, form. But it's quite an experience. It's a lot of fun, but again, it's not something you do or I do on a regular basis. If I lived closer to them, I might get a membership and go a couple of times. But I go to the sauna, traditional sauna, 175 degrees, 4 times a week for 20 minutes. The research seems to show that the maximum benefit, so there's a dose-dependent benefit with sauna and cold, but with sauna, they've been able to track it, where if you did it once a week, you get a 15 to 20% reduction in all-cause mortality and heart disease and Alzheimer's. And then as you go to 4 times a week, it dramatically increases. And it seems to level off. Yeah,
really
it seems to level off at the 4 times a week for 20 minutes. Like that would be the maximum dose.
But that's at 180 degrees.
Well, no. So your sauna, the 135-degree infrared sauna, is not that different because it's infrared.
Oh.
So by definition, the infrared infrared wavelengths penetrate your tissue faster and deeper at lower temperatures. Whereas the 180 degrees is what's needed for the more traditional sauna. It's not infrared.
That's good to know. So even though, let's say, I'm not soaked in sweat at the end of that 20 minutes, I still had the benefits from that?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. That's really good to know, because I cannot see myself doing 4 days a week at 45 minutes. That's a lot of my time, but it's also, I just don't see that happening. But at 20 minutes, I'm writing this down, that's doable.
And there are larger saunas that you could, where you could actually do yoga in there, and you can, you can listen to like you can kind of get work done, right?
Yeah.
Almost.
Yeah.
But the benefit of sauna is different than cold plunge. Yes, there's the heat shock proteins and there's all of the benefits of that. But sauna mimics long duration, low intensity exercise.
Oh, sure.
So,
Sure.
You've heard me talk about zone 2 exercise. Your heart rate goes up, but it's, so you're sweating, you're having all of so you get much of the benefits of long duration, low intensity exercise with sauna. And that's powerful, because you could even just simply do 20 air squats or 10 air squats once a minute for the entire 10 minutes that you're in there. You're getting a low level kind of a workout. I use a heart rate monitor when I do that, and it's no different than a zone 2 exercise for me, my heart rate. So I'll do 10 air squats once a minute for that 15 or 20 minutes that I'm in the sauna, and I can keep my heart rate at the 135 to 140 zone by doing that. And it's just it's kind of a hack, right?
I can see that. So the sauna is a low form Z1, Z2 exercise output.
Correct.
That's very, very interesting. So is that the primary health benefit as opposed to the cold with the heat immersion? Is that, Dr. G?
I would say that's one of the major ones, because again, you get the same benefits of that kind of exercise, where when you step out, your blood pressure is lower. There's all kinds of those post-exercise kind of benefits that occur. But there is more to it, because there's going to be a nitric oxide benefit. You're going to produce, just like with exercise, you're going to produce more nitric oxide, but that nitric oxide is going to provide vasodilation. Blood vessels are going to open up and deliver more oxygenated blood to the most distal blood vessels, the tiniest blood vessels in your body. So it's great for circulation, but also great for brain function. So the benefits with Alzheimer's and cognitive decline are pretty dramatic. I think they exceed what's seen with zone 2 exercise. So there is more to the sauna physiology than in just the post-exercise effect. But the post-exercise effect is certainly powerful.
Do you ever experience after you do your sauna sessions a headache or a feeling of a dehydration? Do you ever get that?
Never.
Okay, so I'll explain to you what I experience. Um, I do once a week, 45 minutes. I'm soaked. I don't know how many pounds of water I lose, but it's quite a bit. Um, I'm very diligent after with replenishing with electrolytes. Redmond Relight, who podcast is sponsored by one of the sponsors, an amazing electrolyte powder. Um, I'll do 2 servings of that with like lots of water. And I would say, yeah, 7 to 8 out of 10 times, 70 to 80% of the time, I wake up either during the night or that following morning with a dehydration stress headache at the top of my traps. And I went to bed peeing fine. I supplemented lots of sodium and electrolytes and water and things, my veins, I was vascular, things felt good. But I don't know what my body does during those 8 or 9 hours to where it sucks me dry. And it's only the only correlation. I can row for like 60 minutes, hard, soaked, dry. I'm fine. Like I don't have this. It's the sauna. The sauna gives me that. Can you explain that? Or is that just a weird
I
thing?
can I can guess. I can guess and say that it's not dehydration as much as it's a post exercise or a post sauna hydration method that you have where you're using. So you're doing your hydration and electrolytes after the sauna, correct?
Yep.
Switch it. Do it in the beginning.
So
Do the
load up on electrolytes and water before I get into the sauna.
Yeah. So you said you do a double dose of the electrolytes.
Yep.
So I would one dose before, one dose after. Because it might be that the electrolytes are causing a temporary blood pressure shift. Because again, when salt intake can cause an acute raise in your blood pressure. The relationship between salt and blood pressure is not that salt increases your blood pressure chronically. Salt increases your blood pressure acutely.
Yep.
So by taking in the electrolytes, which technically is salt, right?
Yep.
Could cause an acute blood pressure change, which is what that would cause a headache, which might be confusing with a dehydration headache.
And maybe I'm going into the sauna session partially dehydrated anyways. And then I, which could be, and I suck myself even more dry. And then even though I flood the system back with it, it still may not be enough, or maybe just the imbalance is so far off. But that's a great tip. I'm going to do that. I'll do 1 serving with like 16 ounces of water before, get in, and then I'll do another serving with more water as needed after. And I'll see if that makes a difference.
Yeah. It might. That's what I would try, because that might be the mechanism for the headache rather than dehydration.
Okay. All right. So protocols for people with heat. We've pretty much gotten into them. You said your protocols 4 times a week, 20 minutes. I was doing 1 time a week, 45 minutes. I'm going to switch now to more frequent, but less duration. And then I'm going to, I'll look at the electrolyte, and I would say that electrolyte tip is for everybody listening, because you don't want to get that headache that I get. It's not a migraine, but it's not comfortable. And so, yeah, that is great. One thing I want to circle back before we close this out is with the cold. This is something that, we're talking about heat now. Obviously, that's comfortable and it feels really good. The cold sucks. And so one thing I've noticed is discipline in the right brain, left brain, right? Like the one side of the brain just wants you comfortable all the time. It says, don't hit that switch over to the cold, just skip today. It'll be better tomorrow. All these things, this happens to me like every day. It just tells me every reason why I shouldn't just toughen up and just do it. And that's something that I've taken away now 4 months in, being very diligent with this, is not just seeking comfort all the time and being okay with that brief period of being uncomfortable. So for people listening saying, oh, that could never be me, jump in cold water, blah, 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 I would really analyze that. And I would wager that you're probably too comfortable in many areas of your life. If you can, I sent out a newsletter a few months ago with the 60-second, actually, I think it was 30-second cold shower challenge. And the number of responses I got from people were like, I could never do that. And that's, you're crazy. I'm going to go farther down that rabbit hole and to say, look at all your daily habits. And I bet you there may be a correlation with lack of discipline with a bunch of stuff there. So for me, that's just a personal anecdote. Like, I battle with it just like any human would, as far as it being uncomfortable, being tough, all the reasons why I can't, but I make myself do it. And so if that motivates anyone, that's great.
I'd like to add to that. So, Josh, I hired you to help me with my fitness and my training, and I've never been someone to back away from anything that's hard or difficult, and I'm always willing to make myself very uncomfortable. But I hired you because my physical fitness at 52 years old got very, very stale for a number of years. And you had worked with a dear friend of mine and one of the fittest people I know who's my age. And I'm like, I have to make some changes here. So when I came up to see you and you did your evaluation, and what's beautiful is that you work with me virtually now, and you would send me these exercises with a link to a video on how to do it. And I'd look at it and say, I'm not doing that. I can't do a tuck. I can't, make my body do that without falling and cracking my head open. But there's a progression. Mm-hmm. There's a progression. And the satisfaction, so like you said, it sucks to be in the cold, but man, does it feel good to get out and experience the rest of the day with that increased, that, like you said, that caffeine feeling. Well, there's nothing like accomplishing something that you said to yourself. You told you, your self-talk was, I can't do that. And then you do it, and the reward is massive. It's just such a massive experience. I'm telling you, I've transformed my body in the last 6 months that I've been following your recommendations. And just before this call, I was saying how I feel like 40% of the I feel like I'm not even giving 100%. I feel like I'm giving 60%, and I'm still benefiting a great deal. Okay. So I ascribe to the kind of the Joe Rogan, like, so he says a lot in his podcast. He'll say, you got to do things that are hard. You got to do things you think you can't do. Life is going to pass you by, and you're going to sit there and tell yourself, I can't do something. The first question you should be asking yourself is, really, is that true? Maybe I should try. Yeah. And so that tuck maneuver, I still haven't mastered it yet, but I'm getting closer and closer. I mean, even just doing the ring push-ups, just having that control is something that took a while. And several of the other exercises that you had given me, I had to start with a very almost like childlike progression, and now I can do it. So awesome. Anyone listening out there, anything that you think you can't do, or that's hard, or that you don't want to do, just stop thinking and do it. Get it out of the way and move on with your day.
Yeah, take action. Yes, right. With a small progression. Joe Rogan also said something years ago along those lines, that unless you voluntarily choose difficult, you will find difficult somewhere, negative or positive. I'll never forget that. So like a hard workout or the cold or if you can choose that, that's the checkbox for the day for difficult. But if you don't, which most people don't, you're going to get into some shitty conversation or have, something difficult will find you.
Oh, you know what's difficult? You know what's difficult being sick, right? You know what's
that's
difficult?
true.
Waiting for somebody to come and pick you up on an airplane with a wheelchair because you can't navigate your body across the airport. So that's difficult. Not being able to get down on the floor with your grandchildren, that's going to be difficult. Not having to sell your house because you can't do stairs anymore, that's going to be difficult. So you're right, difficult is going to find you. You might as well do it while you're young and able.
That's great. That's a great way to finish this talk. We're about an hour in. Dr. G, this is great. I respect you in so many ways. I learned so much from our talks. I'm hoping our listeners do also. How can listeners find more about you and your practice and all the good work you're doing and research possibly becoming a patient of yours?
Oh, thank you. And I got to tell you, I think right now, as you know, the best place to find me is on Instagram. I've found some recent, success there. And somebody challenged me back in June to just, I guess what I've always been known for as a doctor is my ability to communicate concepts that are, important to understand for your health and to do it in a way that they've never heard before. So the challenge was put out some content on a regular basis. So I did. I started doing 3 to 5 videos a week over the last 6 months. And I've had a tremendous amount of growth. People are appreciating the information. So the Instagram, what is it, tag or my at Dr. Stephen G, DrSteveng. You could find me there. And then there's a link there where you could, if you needed to find my website, it's easy to find. It's drsteveng.com. Everything is Dr. Stephen G, Twitter and all of my social media handles. But Instagram is where I'm having the most fun, sharing the most information. That's where I suggest people go to find me.
Yeah, and I'll piggyback on that. Your Instagram is a ton of free education. And, I take away a lot. The way that you do your videos and simplify complex topics is brilliant. And so for people that want to learn more and educate themselves, find you on Instagram. You have almost 400,000 followers, right? You're getting up there. So obviously the material is resonating with people. And for our listeners, I know it can too. So find Dr. G on that. All right, we'll wrap up. Everyone, thanks for listening. Dr. G, thank you as always. We'll have you back on the show sometime soon.
Thank you, Josh.